I think I'm gonna go to sleep. Whoop, 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 whoop. What's that? The Hashinshin alarm? Oh my god! Ryze has released HOTFIX. That's right, folks. Ryze has released a hotfix right after releasing the patch. So because you guys like me going over the patch notes so much, we're going to go over another patch note in addition to the previous patch notes. That's 2 patch notes. What did they do? Well, Ryze is adjusting Kog'Maw, Olaf, Ryze, and Zeri, and we're going to go through all of them. Kog'Maw, what happened? Kog'Maw, well, you see, they over-nerfed him. How did they over-nerf him? He was so overpowered last patch, and now he's not overpowered. What happened? Well, Ryze did what I like to call the triple threat. What is the triple threat? That's when you nerf 3 things all at the same time on a champion who's a little bit overpowered. By all 3 of them combining, you end up nerfing a champion a little bit too much. Not too much, but you know, a little too much. 48%. Should Kog'Maw be viable? Actually, I'm gonna be honest with you, probably not. I kind of hate Kog'Maw. He just sort of stat checks everyone into the ground. I'm not really a fan of Kog'Maw. I'm not really a fan of Kog'Maw at all. In fact, I hate him. But maybe he shouldn't be, well, you know, really underpowered for the first time he's been viable in years. So remember, I'm gonna go over this again. So remember, they nerfed his armor and MR shred, the percent. They nerfed that by a little bit. They nerfed the passive bonus attack speed by a little bit, and they nerfed his health damage by a little bit. So what are they doing? Well, they're going back and they're removing half of the nerf they did on his percent health damage. Well, actually, I'm gonna double check here. So it was 3 to 7%, and now it's gonna be 3.5 to 6.5%. So actually, he'll have a little bit of a buff in the early game for his W damage, not in total, but only for his W damage. And in the late game, it'll be a little bit of a nerf. That's it. That's all they're doing to Coggers. By the way, before we go further into this, ever make sure to like, ever make sure to subscribe, and leave a comment down below. You know, do you agree? Do you disagree with any of this? You know, go for it. Anyway, so then we got Olaf. Okay, so they finally did what I've been begging them to do with Olaf this whole time. Okay, Riot, please. I like this, but man, sometimes you just gotta listen to me. Seriously, like a 30% armor shred on a champion who already had so many anti-tank mechanics in his kit. He had the E true damage spam. He had the ultimate, which allowed him to beat the crap out of tanks indefinitely and go CC immune. He had the magic resist on his ultimate that meant tanks couldn't possibly burst him. He had the W shield, which tanks couldn't possibly burst him. Anyone immobile, he beat the crap out of. Their only response to Olaf was to build armor, and then they couldn't build armor. So what happened to Olaf, though? Well, okay. What happened to Olaf is what I like to call, well, you know, let's go over this. So his win rate actually went up. How did it go up? Now, I know I'm cannibalizing a video I literally just made, but it's getting no views anyway. So here's what happened to Olaf. They nerfed his lifesteal like the teensy tiniest little bit. I'm not going to go that much into it. But they buffed his Q damage. They lowered his Q cooldown, nerfed his late game W, and nerfed his late game ultimate. As I explained before, let me explain it one more time. You always get in the early game, you do not always get into the late game. And if you have a stronger earlier game, that gives you very frequently a stronger late game by the process of being fed. Does that make sense to everyone? So here's the problem here. In addition to that, by reducing the time between Q casts, that was actually a really substantial buff for Olaf. And he went from a solid 53% win ratio to getting nerfed to a 54% win ratio. That went up. So, okay, there's another thing I want to talk about real quick, though. And I'm going to go over this a lot because this is going to keep coming up. Here we go. They nerfed Riftmaker. They nerfed Landry's Anguish. They nerfed some of this other stuff, Kraken Slayer. So they nerfed a lot of the sustained damage items that people could use to try to chew through Olaf. So the problem was a lot of champions found themselves kind of struggling to even deal with Olaf. In addition to that, they buffed Steric's Gauge, nerfed Death's Dance, but the thing is, by nerfing Death's Dance and buffing Steric's Gauge, Olaf kind of came out equal because he built both of them, whereas a lot of other champions only built one. So this is what happened, Olaf at 54%. So that's too high. That's too high. You shouldn't be at 54%. Okay. So His armor is going from, his armor shred is going from 20 to 30% to 20% at all ranks. Once again, they're nerfing his late game, which I'm a little bit iffy on. His W shield is going down by the percent health, so early and late game. His W shield is going from 22.5% missing health to 17.5% missing health. That's a fairly substantial nerf, and I think that means it caps out somewhere at like 13% health instead of, it was capping out somewhere around like 16, 17. I don't have the math in front of me. It had a lot of, it was a big shield. Now it's going to be a much smaller shield, which is probably fine because they did nerf sustain damage elements. And look, I'm gonna be blunt with you. A lot of champions were struggling to be able to deal with Olaf. Between the Stark's Gauge and between his W shield, a lot of champions needed a lot of sustained damage that often they couldn't find anymore. Ryze, what happened with Ryze? Well, nothing actually. I mean, they buffed him and it just didn't do anything. So what are they doing? Let's talk about his buff. They lowered the mana cost on his E and they buffed the AP ratio on his E. Why didn't that do anything? Because he's bad. And how bad is he? He's like really bad. I've gone over this before, but look, the problem Ryze is having is that he's really bad because his ultimate is so good in pro play. It means once again he has an ultimate in pro play, he doesn't have an ultimate in solo queue. Does everyone get that? Imagine if they took Kale and they said her ultimate can only be used in pro play. Well, yeah, then to be balanced in solo queue, she'd need like a to be balanced in pro play, her solo queue win rate would need to be like 42%, much like Ryze. So what they're trying to do is they're trying to bring back Ryze a little bit, and he'll likely be overpowered in pro play again, but for now what they're doing is they're giving him back the AP ratio on his Q. Or sorry, on his Q? On his E. Okay. Now, to explain this one, I actually want to explain this one so some of you guys can understand this a bit better, because they're actually being somewhat intelligent with this one. Ryze's Q gets a damage multiplier. When he hits someone with his E, when he puts his, let me zoom in here, when he puts his E, that's spell flux, that's when he goes ching, and he like skips the disc at you. When he puts that on you, his Q then does, based on the rank of his ultimate, 40 to 100% more damage. So his Q has up to 1.0 AP ratio on a spammable ability. That's a lot of damage, but that's a skill shot. So what Riot is doing is they're buffing his E damage. Now I'm skipping over this Q for a second here, just bear with me on this. They're buffing his E damage from 60, I think that was a 160 to 60 to 180 with its AP ratio. Before this patch was 0.3, now it's all the way up to 0.45. So unskilled Ryze players, people bad at playing Ryze who can't hit their EQ every time, will do a lot better. I'm highlighting the wrong ability. They'll do a lot better. So what is the second buff they're doing? His Q cooldown is going down. Why does that not really matter? Let me explain this one for you guys. Passive. Ryze's other basic abilities cast reset overloads cooldown. So the thing is, Ryze basically always just goes EQ, 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 EQ. While this means that potentially you can EQ, wait a second and a half, and then Q EQ again. So he has like a little bit of a combo, I guess he could potentially do. Realistically, 90% of the time, are you going to wait that extra 1.5 seconds to get in an extra half damage Q? No, you're just going to EQ, EQ, EQ. So this buff, I'm not really sure. This seems to be a buff maybe if you're like messed up or something, or you're bad at the game. I don't know, but there you go. So what are they doing for Ryze? They're giving him a, do you suck at Ryze? Can you not hit his EQs? Here's a good damage buff for you. Okay, Zeri the carry was very broken as shit and was basically, whichever team had Zeri was winning. Here, let me go look at Zeri and you can see here, let me look at this. Zeri, even at Plat, was a 53.93% win rate. Once he went into Masters Plus, she has a 55.6% win rate with the highest pick rate. That is quite overpowered. If I could, let me talk about Zeri real quick and I'll explain what happened. They buffed the shit out of her damage, gave her W, or that thing that can crit now. She does a billion zillion more damage, right? But they removed some utility. I'm not going to go over that too much. They removed some utility, but they buffed her damage pretty heavily. So how are they toning her down? Well, they're going halfway back on their Q buff. The base damage buff remains, but instead of a 0.1 AD ratio buff per Q, it's now a 0.05 AD ratio buff per Q. In addition to that, her passive no longer caps out how much damage it does at level 13. Yes, it used to be levels 1 to 13, 3 to 15% health damage. It's now 1 to 15% health damage at levels 1 to 18. So her passive damage has gone down considerably in the early game and only equals out at level 18, which is, yeah, I mean, obviously that's a pretty big nerf, right? I mean, as I said earlier, you'll always be in the early game, but you aren't guaranteed to be in the late game. In addition to that, what they're doing is they're nerfing her E, Spark Surge, which I think that's, I'm like 99.9% positive that's her dash. I'm going to double check that just because, you know, yeah, okay, that's her dash. Okay, so she's less mobile. Again, they nerfed her dash earlier in this patch. Now they're nerfing it again, and now they're bringing back her damage. Basically, Riot wants Zeri to do more damage and actually be able to kill people and not just be a perma-kite bot that, you know, eventually whittles down entire teams. So they're buffing her damage and nerfing her mobility, and that's basically it. And that's his hotfix. These are 4 champions. Kog'Maw was over nerfed. Olaf got buffed on accident, but to be honest, I told Riot that was gonna happen. But at least they finally are pulling back the armor shred. They're pulling back the shield. This might be a little bit too much, but he's pretty goddamn overpowered right now, so we'll see. Might be too much. I'm leaving it open. This Ryze change, I'll be dead honest, I don't expect it to really make him viable, but I do expect it to make him playable. I expect that I will see some Ryze players, not often, but I will see some. Instead of never seeing him ever, I will go back to seeing some Ryze players. Zeri is being taken down a chunk. She's being taken down a good chunk. I agree with this 100%. I might even have gone further. In fact, if it was me, I would have gone further. I would have 100% gone further. I think her W being able to crit is a bit of a oddity, and I don't really understand it. And even if you want to keep the W critting, then they shouldn't have buffed the AD ratio on it. Maybe bring back the AD ratio on it so it doesn't crit for like 300, but maybe only like 280 early game, you know? So that's it. That's this patch. That was Hashinshin news hour. I don't know. It was 9 p.m. for me, man. I came in here. You guys like watching these patch stupid things, so I guess I'll keep making them. I mean, we'll go with it. So thank you all for watching. Thank you all for being here. I hope you all have a great rest of your day. Thank you, everybody.